His countenance was pleasing and majestic, but when he was angry, one of his eyes shone with such a terrible light that no man could endure its gaze, and the wretch on whom it was turned fell back in confusion, and sometimes even expired on the spot. So, for fear of depopulating his country and making a desert of his palace, the prince took care that his anger was but rarely aroused.
Hey, it's Andrew from the Isle of Misfit Books. Welcome. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at Vathek, the 1786 pioneering Arabian Nights-style Gothic horror novel by William Beckford, who at the time of writing was England's richest man. And this is at a time when England was the world's largest, most powerful, and richest empire, so that's saying something. He started writing Vathek at just 21 years of age in 1782. How did he become England's richest man at just 21? His father died and left him sugar plantations in Jamaica. His grandfather had been the governor of Jamaica, and according to the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, the Beckfords owned 20 estates in Jamaica. That's a quote. What they leave out of the quote is that on those 20 estates lived some 1,200 slaves, whom they also owned. So that kind of money. Though he was thoroughly English, Beckford spent many years on the continent. He perfected his French in Geneva, and he originally wrote Vathek in French, but more on that later. Vathek, the main character of Beckford's novel, is what we now call a billionaire, or an oligarch. Vathek is a caliph, which historically means a descendant of Muhammad or his close intimates. But in this 18th century novel, it means a man whose wealth and power knows no bounds. This is essentially what Beckford was and what Musk is today. The book is both a sly satire and a self-own, and that's part of what makes it so fascinating. So what is the book about? It's about Vathek and his evil mother, Carathis, which is kind of psychologically interesting. Beckford's father died when he was 11, leaving him, according to the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, in quotes, under the day-to-day control of his possessive and tyrannical mother. And she is a great villain, absolutely ruthless in her pursuit of occult knowledge and power. But really, all the main characters in this book are villains, or craven, obsequious enablers of those villains. Vathek, we are told, had studied so much in order to banish boredom that he was learned. But at last he wished to fathom all things, even the sciences which do not exist. He liked to argue with learned men, and was never found to support the opinion which was looked upon as orthodox. By this he put all the pious against him. So then he persecuted them, for he wished at all costs to be in the right. It's a book for our age, every bit as much as it was for Beckford's own. The plot is episodic, but the episodes move faster than the news cycle during a Trump presidency, and they're equally insane. It's essentially a series of tricks played upon Vathek by the Giaour, the infidel, sent for this purpose by Muhammad. And these tricks undermine the caliph's blind thirst for knowledge and power, continually reducing him to a state of illness or lethargy or pain or humiliation until his mother once again rescues him or revives him with her magic. You'd almost call him hapless, except this thoroughly unprincipled man is willing to sacrifice anything and everything to meet the Giaour's demands, always in exchange for promises of power and knowledge. In one of these episodes, the Giaour promises to open the gates of the Palace of Subterranean Fire, where he will reveal to Vathek the dark sources of his magical power, which will make Vathek all-powerful. In exchange, however, the Giaour demands the blood of 50 children to slake his thirst. 50. 50. He announces that to celebrate his return to health from a previous episode, he's going to throw a lavish party for these 50 boys and their families and friends. He stages this party in the countryside where, to separate the boys from their parents, he has them line up to each receive a gift, near a dark crevasse where the Giaour is waiting. Vathek hesitates, and the Giaour shouts at him in such a way that he alone can hear.
A plague on thy soft-heartedness, chatterer! Give them to me, and right speedily, or my portal shall be closed to thee forever.
While with one hand he presented the gift to the eager child, with the other he pushed the recipient into the chasm, where the Giaour, incessantly growling, repeated without intermission the word,
More, more.
Now, the children are eventually rescued by a good-hearted genie, but Vathek never learns this. Of course, the parents are outraged. Vathek flees to his mother, and once she learns of the Giaour's promises, she says, "This Giaour is somewhat bloodthirsty, but no crime is too great when such treasures are the reward." She opens the caliph's coffers and showers the parents with gold coins until they leave, but now his mother Carathis is involved and equally determined to learn the powerful, horrible secrets of the palace of subterranean fire, which just sounds so much more appetizing than hell, doesn't it? So Vathek, in his wanderings, eventually encounters Nouronihar, the beautiful daughter of Emir Fakhreddin, who hosts Vathek and his entourage. Nouronihar is betrothed to her cousin, the equally beautiful Gulkenruz. Gulkenruz, for all his good qualities, he can write, he can sing, he's beautiful, is a child. He's effeminate, and he spends all his time in the harem with the women. He's no match for the wealthy, cunning, ruthlessly womanizing caliph. So then there's a bit of a Romeo and Juliet ruse where the emir gives the two young betrothed, his daughter and his nephew, a sleeping potion that he hopes will convince Vathek that they've died. So the caliph will go away and leave him and his daughter alone. He does not inform Nouronihar and Gulkenruz of this plan. They take the sleeping potion, and then they are wakened in a hut, and they're told that they are actually in the land of the dead. Vathek is told of their death as well, and shown their seemingly lifeless bodies, but he's so distressed that he doesn't want to leave. Now, Nouronihar is an interesting character, and part of what elevates Vathek. She's not at all your typical passive pretty princess. She's not content, like Gulkenruz is, to accept her fate and live out the rest of her days with her cousin in this hut by the lake with the melancholy storks. One morning, while her cousin sleeps, she sets out to explore, and comes across Vathek, of course. They realize they've been duped, and they set off together. The caliph has his entourage screen off an entire valley just for him and Nouronihar. And there, the caliph enjoyed the charms of Nouronihar in full measure. He listened with transport to her beautiful voice and to the harmonies of her lute. For her part, she was enraptured with his descriptions of Samarra and of his tower and the wonders to be found in it. When his mother, Carathis, learns that her son has turned aside from his quest to enter the Palace of Fire, she sets out to get him back on track. She catches up to the lovers, demands that Vathek get rid of this distraction, Nouronihar, and continue on his quest. Nouronihar, to avoid being killed, tells Vathek in the presence of his mother, "I will not fear to climb for you up to the nest of the Simurgh, who, after Madame Carathis here, is the most awesome being that has ever been created." To which Vathek's wicked mother, properly flattered, says, "Here is a girl of courage and knowledge." Led on by the Giaour's lies, they descend into the palace of subterranean fire. The Giaour leads them to Eblis, and he's awesome. This whole last section is great, sublime. They meet Solomon, son of David, and hear his sorrowful story. They see that his bosom was of transparent crystal, through which could be seen his heart consumed in flames. Carathis, riding on the back of an Ifrit, joins them, impatient and demanding always. "Why aren't you sitting on the throne already?" is basically what she asks her son. But he knows by now what's coming for him. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that all three are condemned, like those they meet in the palace, to an eternity of suffering. These unhappy creatures had recoiled from each other with looks of fury. Vathek no longer saw in Nouronihar's glance anything but rage and vengeance, and she read in his eyes nothing but aversion and despair. The history of Vathek's composition and publication is tangled. As a youth, Beckford was a fan of the tales of the Arabian Nights and the myriad imitators that were very much in vogue at that time. So much so that his tutor locked these books away from him and forbid him to read any more of that sort of thing. But when he came of age at 21 and could do as he pleased, his friend and mentor, Samuel Henley, reignited this passion and even suggested to him that he write a story of his own in this vein. So we have a letter from Beckford to Henley in 1782 when he was 21. "You are answerable for having set me to work upon a story so horrid that I tremble whilst relating it." By September of 1783, he had finished the story and sent it to Henley from Geneva, and writes, "You proposed likewise to translate Vathek, which I left in your hands." The next year, 1784, he writes, "I long eagerly to read your translation." And then finally, in the spring of 1785, Beckford writes raving to Henley about his translation. "You make me proud of Vathek. The original, when first born, scarce gave me so much rapture as your translation." It's in 1786 when things start to go off the rails. Not only had Henley translated the work into English, he'd also advised on revisions to the story and contributed extensive, rather pedantic scholarly notes on each of Beckford's offhand references to places, people, costumes, customs, flora, and fauna. By this time, he'd probably invested more time on this tale than Beckford himself. And yet Beckford kept putting off publication. "The publication of Vathek must be suspended at least another year," he writes in February of 1786. "I would not have him on any account precede the French edition. The episodes to Vathek are nearly finished, and the whole thing will be completed in 11 to 12 months. I must repeat, therefore, my desire that you will not give your translation to the world till the original has made its appearance." Very specific. Now, at the end of May in that year, 1786, Beckford's wife of 3 years died 2 weeks after giving birth to their second daughter, leaving him devastated. In August, he writes to Henley, "My spirits and rest are broken. I fear the dejection of mind into which I am plunged will prevent my finishing the other stories." And of course, Vathek's making his appearance in any language this winter. Now, these other stories or episodes that Beckford refers to were tales that were going to be told to Vathek and Nouronihar by 4 men and 1 woman whom they meet once they enter the Palace of Subterranean Fire. These 5 had preceded them, and they had their own tales of woe that Beckford wanted them to tell, sort of in the style of Canterbury Tales or the Decameron. He never included these, and I'm glad he didn't. These characters are introduced 3 pages from the end, and their long stories would have interrupted the climax intolerably, in my opinion, and dragged things out and away from the 2 whose comeuppance we really want to see at this point in the narrative. So between the amount of work that Henley had invested, and Henley was not a wealthy man like Beckford, and the prospect of a grieving Beckford putting off publication indefinitely until he'd finished these 3 other long episodes, I can almost understand Henley taking his translation and his notes to a publisher and having them published anonymously under the guise of it being a translation from the Arabic. Almost. At least I can empathize with Henley. Beckford was furious and sued Henley, but it was too late. The Caliph was out of the bag. Beckford raced to publish his French original so that he could claim authorship and denounce the fraudulence of Henley's claim that this was something translated from the Arabic. He published it in Lausanne in French early in 1787, but without the unfinished episodes. Some scholars suspect, though, that this was not actually the original French, but a rushed translation back into French that Beckford made from the English translation that Henley had sent him as a courtesy. Because it's possible that Beckford hadn't made a copy of his original, which he had sent to Henley. And this argument is based on certain kind of sloppy anglicisms that are found in that Lausanne edition that were then smoothed over and eliminated from the Paris edition that appeared later that same year. Although, even there are some who have made the case, at least, that the Paris edition preceded the Lausanne edition, although that seems very unlikely at this point. So Henley's pirated English translation appeared first in 1786, and the first French edition might not be the original French, but a translation of that translation. At any rate, it wasn't until 1815 that Beckford finally issued his definitive authorized French edition in London. Regardless, immediately on its appearance, Vathek secured for Beckford so great a reputation that he may well have hesitated subsequently to print anything of the same kind. Certainly, he never entirely gave up the idea of publishing the episodes, and in the last decade of his long life was willing to let Bentley have them, even eager that he should have them, but at a price. "I will not let the manuscripts go under £1,000, he said to Cyrus Redding in 1838, more than 50 years after Vathek had appeared. Apparently, £1,000 was too steep for Bentley. The episodes disappeared. They were rediscovered and finally published in 1912, so you will sometimes see editions of Vathek with the episodes. Many of the black and white illustrations you've been seeing are by Mahlon Blaine, illustrator of the 1928 John Day edition. He's fantastic, and this is certainly one of his best books from his best period. His drawings match the grotesque and decadent tone of the material perfectly. There are dozens of illustrations in this edition, and I like the way several of them sequence over 2 pages, or even like this, or even 4. The full page illustrations in particular are excellent, and the end papers, wow. The other black and white illustrations are by Charles W. Stewart for the 1953 Bodley Head edition. His are more restrained, working in a similar vein. There are only 8 full-page illustrations in this edition, which makes me wish there were more, whereas the Blaine edition is stuffed full and perhaps overstuffed. Stewart is great, and researching him, I learned that he was apparently working on a series of illustrations for Mervyn Peake's Titus Groan, which is one of my all-time favorites, certainly an author in a book that we'll get to on this channel. And while, of course, you want Peake's illustrations for his own book, Stewart's are really good too. They were never published, but you can find them on the internet. He's excellent. The color illustrations that I've been using are from illustrated editions of the Arabian Nights by Rene Bull, Edmund Dulac, and Maxfield Parrish. This 1928 John Day Mahlon Blaine edition uses the 1786 Henley translation, which it's a bit stiff and archaic. Elephantine is the word that the Bodley Head preface uses to describe it. It's certainly readable, and the Penguin edition prints the Henley translation, of course. That's Vathek's first appearance, and it makes sense. But I kind of prefer this Bodley Head edition has a more modern, a 1929 translation from the French original by Herbert Grimsditch. And I prefer that English, and the quotes that I've been reading or putting on the screen are from that edition. It's just a little more modern, a little easier to read to my taste. So do I recommend Vathek? Absolutely. If you're a fan of horror or fantasy or the weird, this is a pioneering work. You just have to bear in mind that this is from a time well before genres were established, well before genres were even a thing, and so it tumbles from horror to picaresque to satire to farce to romance to morality tale, just kind of over and over again. The tone varies very widely, and like I said, it's not really a plot so much as a series of vaguely related episodes. But it does culminate in the relationship with Noronihar and their journey to the Palace of Subterranean Fire. That last third in particular, I mean, all of the book is a lot of fun, but that last third approaches the sublime and truly fantastical. It's great. This is a novel that owes as much to Voltaire's Candide as it does to the Arabian Nights or to any of those early kind of proto-Gothics that were starting to appear around the same time. Beckford, when he was 17 or 18 during his first tour of the continent, he actually met Voltaire in Switzerland, which is pretty cool. I hope you've enjoyed this brief tour of this neglected masterpiece. If so, leave a like. Could Musk have written Vathek? Should Musk read Vathek? Or might that give him ideas? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe, as I'll be continuing putting out videos on similar books that are rare, strange, underappreciated from all time periods. If you'd like a similar tour of an unknown illustrated fantasy from 1923, click here. And check out my books. They're kind of weird too. Links in the description box below. Till next time, thanks for stopping by.